Greetings, Digital Cathedral family. Hoping you're having a great day. It's Sunday morning. Time to delve into some things that might be a mystery to some, but we're going to try to make it as plain as we can today. We're going to really lay out the reason why you might just see the world in the condition that it's in today and what the Father has to say about that. All right, I want to begin over in Ephesians chapter 4. I want to read just a couple of verses. And if I were to put a title on the teaching today, I would title it this: Truth Trumps Facts. Right? Truth trumps facts. Now we're gonna get into some interesting ideas this morning that I think are going to help you to see past why some things that happen to you have an appearance of not being to your advantage. Can we do that? All right, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 4. I'm going to read verse 4, 5, and 6. Now, notice what he says here. There is one body and one spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. And verse 7 says, one of my favorite verses, one God and Father of all, who is above all, through all, and in all. Now, when I read those verses 4, 5, and 6, there's a word that should stand out there. There's one body, one spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one God and Father of all, who's above all, through all, and in all. Now, if I counted correctly, there are 7 ones in those 3 verses. 7. So let's talk today. Let's deep dive into this idea about God being the one. If what Paul was writing was true and he laid so much emphasis on one, then there must be some mystery maybe, but some truth as to what this one is all about. So today we're going to talk about God being the one and only source of creation. There's only one source of life. That's what the scripture was pointing out. One source of life. There's not 2 sources of life. There's not an evil that produces a source of life and God produces a source of life. There's one source of life. And this is important for us to establish this morning in our journey because it's going to affect the way that you see the world. If you can establish oneness this morning, then it's going to affect the way that you see people, the way you see circumstances, the way you see your life developing, and the way that you deal with what I would call disharmony. And I'm going to use that word disharmony several times in the teaching this morning, and I'd like to just define disharmony like this. Disharmony is anything that vacillates from the original design and pattern of the one. Let me read for you some scripture this morning just to point this out. Here's the pattern. Here's the work of the one. All right. Now, I want you to see this as the development of the circumstances in the way that we view life. And I want you to see the one this morning. Verse 3, then God said, let there be light. And there was light. Verse 6, then God said, let there be firmament. Verse 9, then God said, let the waters. Then verse 11, then God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herb. Verse 14, then God said, let there be light in the firmament of the heavens. Verse 20, then God said, let the waters abound with abundance of living creatures. Verse 24, then God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to its kind. Verse 26, then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. All right, so we've got several. I didn't count them. Let me count them real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times that God said. And every time God said, something produced. Every time God made a declaration, something took place. But it came out of one source. It came out of the Father. Everything comes out of one life. So when we read those 7 or 8 scriptures that said God said, Everything that was produced came from one. All things, everything that you see, has its genesis, its beginning in the Father through the Son by the Spirit. Everything has a God imprint on it. Everything that you can visually see with your eye has a God imprint on it because everything was created and comes out of Him that is invisible, producing what is visible. So everything that is visible came from an invisible source. And when He said, let there be, let there be, let there be, let there be, there was a unity and a harmony from the beginning in all of these things. None of these things had any disharmony to them. Everything that God created, He either said it was good, or in the case of man, He looked at that little guy, that little clay pot that he stood up in the next chapter and said, very good. That's very good right there. So in the beginning, everything was perfect. Everything was harmonious. Everything worked in synchronization. Even the view that man had of himself, when Adam saw himself, he saw himself as pure, as perfect, as whole, as complete, as beautiful, being in the image and likeness of God. He had one life with God. He walked with Him in the cool of the evening. He felt loved. He felt secure. He felt exactly the way that he should be as a perfect creation. Had no clue what fear was. Didn't know there was nothing to fear. So there was no fear in Adam. He was living what Jesus would say was the abundant life. Jesus says the thief comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy, John 10:10. He said, but I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. This is the life that Adam was living. He was living that abundant life. That abundant life is the life of original design. The abundant life is the life that from God's side has never changed. Everything that God created, He saw as good and very good, and He still sees it that way. Now, you may look at it a little bit different, but from God's point of view, nothing has changed. The abundant life that Jesus said we could have was a life that was living according to the design, the plan, and the purpose of the Father. And in that life, Adam had one instruction to live that life. He was told to only eat from the tree of life. He said, well, actually, he could eat from other trees. The Father said, of all the trees in the garden, you can eat. But He said, I don't want you eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So how do you eat from the tree of life? I've spent a lot of time with you telling you that the way you eat from the tree of life, fundamentally, basically, is what God says you respond to it. When He says go, you go. When He says stop, you stop. When He says turn left, you turn left. Whatever He says, you respond to it. He is the source. Have we established that this morning? There's one source of life. So the tree of life comes out of that one source. It's responding. And so you see only the God life in everything and everybody. When you look on things, you should see the handiwork of God in everything. Let me read just a little bit more here from John chapter 1. You know me, I read a lot of scripture. John chapter 1. Again, I just want you to see the oneness in the design here. And the oneness that the Father intended for all of us. John chapter 1, I'm just going to read 2 verses, verse 9. That was the true light. There's one light that gives light to every man that comes into the world. So every man that comes into the world has a God light. That's how you should see him. When you look at people, you see them with a God light within them. Then in verse 16, and it says, and of His fullness we've all received. And of His fullness we've all received in grace for grace. So again, when I look at people, when I look at everything, I should see it as containing the fullness of God. He said, of God's fullness we've all received. Now, boy, I tell you what, that's hard on the religious mind. That's hard on the religious mind. In just a minute, I'm going to tell you why it's hard on the religious mind. Let me just drive it home. Again, from the very beginning, there was only one life. And out of that one life, everything appeared that had life. The Spirit of that one life gave a heartbeat to everything that the Father formed. Paul said it's from him, through him, and back to him. That's the cycle of life. Everything comes through him, is upheld by him, passes through him, and eventually returns to him. So as long as Adam saw God's life, God's breath on everything, on all things, as long as that one life filled his thoughts, he lived in the glory of God, which is the presence of God. He lived fully in the presence of God. That's what the tree of life looks like. It looks like living in the presence of God through responding to what God says and not partaking of anything that God said don't eat. And this is where we begin now to get into the problem. At some time, at the same time he was told to eat every tree, eat from that tree of life. At the same time, he was told to never judge anything right or wrong. That's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He said, don't judge things good or evil, right or wrong. That's eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, here's the question. I don't know if you've ever weighed this out. Why was Adam told not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why was he told not to make those kind of determinations for himself? I'm going to tell you exactly why. Because it brought two sources into play. I have just spent over 10 minutes laying out the case of oneness. There's one source of life, one creator. We read from Ephesians 4, 5, and 6, all the ones. And all of a sudden, God says, you don't want to come into the twos. That's dualism. And the problem with dualism, it moves you out of the garden, it moves you out of the tree of life, and it presents to you now an alternative source. And it sets you up as the one that makes the determination of what is right and wrong, what is good and evil. It disconnects us in our thinking from the genesis of everything. So we become our own God by judging what is good, evil, what is right, and what is wrong. And that has created the world that we live in. The disharmony in the world that we face and that we live in was created by dualism. Everybody determining for themselves what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is evil, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. We set up laws, break the laws, we punish the lawbreakers. See, we don't live by good. All right, this is a major point right here. We don't live by good. In fact, we don't live by evil or bad. What we live by is every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That's the tree of life right there. So when God speaks a word to you, that's what you live by. You don't live by self-determination. That's the wrong tree. You don't look at things and judge them as good or evil, right or wrong. Wrong tree. When we live the Christ is us life, we never judge by appearance. We never look at something and say good or evil. Wrong tree. What we do is we live beyond that. We see through what appears out of harmony. And boy, there's a lot of things by appearance today that are not fitting. Remember what I told you harmony was? It was fitting the original design and the purpose that the Father created it in. Disharmony is when we move outside of that pattern, and what gives us the ability to do that is when we eat from the wrong tree. But when we see God as all things and understand that everything that God has created is good, now it might not be good from my perspective, might not be good from my point of view. Abraham was the guy that really got a leg up on this thing. He really got an insight as to how to live from the tree of life and not make determinations. Can I read a little bit for you from that? Romans chapter 4. Romans chapter 4. We're going to read a little bit about Abraham and his unwillingness to generally not be moved by appearances. Now, he at one point was, and Ishmael was a result. All of the Ishmaels that you're encountering in life, those works of the flesh, those things you tried to help God to complete, those are things that cause the disharmony. Those are the things that creates for us dilemmas and obstacles. And then we throw our hands up and say, God, I want you to come and take care of this Ishmael for me. No, Ishmael's not going away. You're going to have to deal with it. Here's what Abraham did. Romans chapter 4, let me just read verses 14 down through 21. It's a fairly lengthy passage. But what I want, as I read this, I want you to see how Abraham was not moved by appearances. He did not call something good, did not call it bad, did not call it evil. All right, watch. Here's the word. We live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Here's the word from the mouth of God to Abraham. I have made you the father of many nations, in the presence of him whom he believed, God, who gives life to the dead. Now, when you look at something dead, you would say that's evil. He gives life to the dead. He does not see it as dead. He gives life to the dead and calls things which do not exist as though they did. So God is not moved by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He's moved by what he says and what he sees. And I notice it's past tense here when he spoke to Abraham. I have made you a father of many nations. Done deal. Did it look done? Absolutely not. Would you judge that as good if you're Abraham, 90 years old? Of course not. Now here's what Abraham did. He gives life to the dead, calls things which be not as though they were, that they do exist. Abraham, who contrary to hope, in hope believed. So things were presenting themselves to Abraham that did not look positive. That there was no cause for hope if you're going to judge it good and evil, right and wrong. But he believed, so that he became the father of many nations, according to what was spoken, so shall your descendants be. He was living by the word that proceeded from the mouth of God. He did not, and not being weak in faith, he did not consider his own body already dead. That's what the body said, dead. He was about 100 years old. And the deadness of Sarah's womb. He did not waver at the promise of God through unbelief. If he had have wavered through unbelief, that would have been eaten from the wrong tree. See, Abraham was understanding there was one source, that the one source that gave him a word had the ability to accomplish it. That's what faith is. Faith is a total trust in the one who promised it to perform it. Everything that comes from the tree of life will have precedence, will have dominance, will have priority at the end of the day. He did not waver at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully convinced that what God had promised he was able to perform, and therefore it was accounted to him for righteousness. Now let's just bring this into today's world. If we're going to live the Christ as us life, we're going to have to see true life. And as we see that true life, as we see that one source, and we're insistent about it, we're like Abraham. We don't move. We're not moved by what it appears. That insistence is what brings it into expression or brings it into manifestation. That's how we heal one another. When you're moved, when you're praying for somebody, ministering to somebody, what you want to do is call that seed of life that is within every person. Remember what we read in John, of his fullness we've all received. You want to reach into somebody and pull that life out of them and not be moved, even though what you're seeing is contrary to the original design, which is always life. Jesus absolutely refused to see anything but life. Jesus did not judge it good. He did not judge it evil. Now I'm going to walk you through two situations in the life of Jesus just because I want you to see how Jesus approached it. That Jesus really did live from the tree of life. He was not judging something good, something evil, something right, something wrong. Let's go to John chapter 11, familiar story. I like to use familiar stories because you're not engaged in the story. You can see beyond the story. This is the story of Jesus and Lazarus. So let me read just John chapter 11, verse 11, just to set it up. These things he said, and after he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I'm going to go wake him up. Now, if he would have been judging by appearances, and Lazarus was dead as a doornail. Guy had no life. He was not breathing, no heartbeat. Jesus looked beyond that to the pattern that the Father had set. There's only life in the Father. There's only good or very good. So he says, he failed to recognize the death, and he said, we're going to go wake the guy up. All right, let's bring it down to verse 26. He says to Mary, he says, and whosoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Actually, it's really interesting because Jesus draws a distinction between verse 25 and verse 26 of John chapter 11. I don't have time to chase it down for you, but I just want you to see something. Verse 25, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. He that believes in me, though he dies, he may live. But in verse 26, he takes it down another level, and he says, whosoever lives and believes in me shall never die. So in verse 25, he says there's going to be a pattern where people die and then they live. But he said there is a way, oh man, I want to get into this so bad, that those that live and believe in me will never die. We're coming into that time. And what I'm ministering and teaching to you this morning has a big part in playing in if we're just going to believe in him, or if we're going to live and believe in him and see the original design, the intent, the pattern that the Father inserted within all of creation at the very beginning, if we're going to begin to see that manifesting again on our planet. So then he goes on down to verse 39, and he says, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said he wasn't dead. Jesus said he's sleeping. So what are we going to believe? The appearance or the fact, or are we going to believe the truth? Truth himself says, I'm going to wake the guy up. Fact says he's dead. Let me just tell you, and I'm going to hit this several times, truth always trumps fact. Fact might be your wallet is empty. Truth is, my God will supply all your needs. Now, which one are you going to look at? Fact might be, doctor, and I just was dealing with a man this week. Fact might say, your physical prognosis is this. I never minded diagnosis. What I don't want is a prognosis. Because fact says this, but truth says something entirely different. So not just depends on which tree am I going to begin to eat from? He's been dead 4 days, man. We got a problem here. Jesus said, didn't I not say to you that you would believe when you would see the glory of God? Then he took away the stone from that place where the dead man was lying. Even John said the guy's dead. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me, but because of the people that are standing by, that are moved by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, calling the guy dead, he said, they're around here standing. I said that they may believe that you have sent me. All right. Now, when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Didn't lay hands on him, didn't anoint him, didn't do anything. Just used his voice because of what he was honed into. Jesus only ate from one tree. He had the word from the Father. If we were to rewind the story, we would see that Jesus stayed where he was 3 days after he got word that Lazarus was dead. He was waiting to get the word from the Father before he proceeded. That's how you eat from the tree of life. And when he had, and he who had died came bound hand and foot from the grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said, loose him and let him go. Now, what I want you to see in those two little instances, in that instance with Lazarus, and I don't really have time this morning, but I would take you over to Luke chapter 4, verse 18 and 19, some of my favorite verses, where you remember when Jesus came out of the wilderness, went into the temple, picked up the book. He said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me. That's when you make that confession, Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me. And then he lists 6, 7, 8 things. I can't remember the exact number of things that he's going to do, but he did not recognize. He's now preached the gospel to the poor. Didn't recognize the poor. He said the gospel is the antidote to poverty. I'm going to heal the brokenhearted. He did not see the brokenhearted. He saw the healing. He said, I'm gonna set at liberty the captives. He did not see the captives. He saw the liberty. Why did he see the solution? Because that's what flows from the one source of life. We get so wound up today seeing the problems rather than the word that proceeds from the mouth of God. All Jesus was doing, he was actually quoting from Isaiah. And he got down to the last part and he eliminated a part from Isaiah. The last part of Isaiah in that Jesus was quoting was to deal with the day of vengeance. And Jesus did not recognize any day of vengeance for God. He said, I'm here to teach Jubilee. I'm here to bring Jubilee. And again, if you want to find out what Jubilee was, essentially was every 50 years, every debt was canceled. Freedom came to the land. So Jesus said, that's what I'm here to declare. Now, Paul absolutely refused to be moved by what he could see or what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil would try to dispense to him. Instead, he lived out of this tree of life. And that's what I'm after this morning. But let me bring back my introduction. Until we see only one source, one power, one life. If you're seeing two sources, you say, well, you don't know my kids. My kids are on drugs and this and that. Look, you need to see through that to the fullness of God that is in that child, and you need to call that out. Stop arguing with them about who they appear to be. Start speaking to them who they are. It's all a problem of identity. It's a problem of identity. People that rob banks, they don't know who they are. They don't know the source they're connected to. They're eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil says, I'm broke. The bank's got money. They don't need it. I need it. Therefore, it's okay to rob it. Society looks at it and says, that's an evil deed. We're going to have to punish you. See, everything in the world revolves around the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this planet is going to begin to make radical change as people grow and understand to eat from the tree of life, the word that proceeds from the mouth of God, and respond to it. Right now, we're still living in a lump. We're still in the vast majority, but there will come a time that it will reach the tipping point. And I think you're beginning to see some of that breakout in areas even now. I want to show you about Paul. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I'm preaching pretty good this morning, if I do say so. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Laying some truth out there you're not going to hear down to the church house, that's for sure. 1 Corinthians 15, let me read verses 54 to 57. You know why the church has a problem with this? Because all of religion is based on the wrong tree. Religion is based on telling you by their determination what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's evil. And they go to the book, which should be a book of life, a book that points to Jesus, the source of life, and they're looking at scriptures and pulling out and using them to tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So it all becomes about behavior modification. The Christ is us life is not about behavior modification. It's about responding to what the Father shows you. All right. Paul got it. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, let me read verses 54 to 57. So when this corruption has put on incorruption and this mortal has put on immortality. You see the switch there? You see the flip? When this corruptos put on incorruption, mortal put on immortality, switching trees. That's basically, the tree of life has no death in it. Where is the Zoe, the life of God? Where's it going to go to get death? There's no death in that tree. Then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. Death is not a friend of God. Death does not come from the tree of life. Death comes from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Tree of the knowledge of good and evil says you got to get old and get diseased and die. That's not what he says here. When this mortal's put on immortality. Now I know that seems like a distant jump because of the way we're thinking, the way we've been ingrained. But I'm telling you, it's not going to be a distant jump for some people. The sting of death is sin. Sin is missing that original design and plan of God. Harmatia, sin. If I were to break the word down, I need to teach like 2-3 hours. Break the word harmatia down. It means to not fit the original plan or design. We normally call it missing the bullseye, missing the mark. And that's true. But the mark that it misses is not by your action. It's missing the original design and the intent of the Father. That's what sin is. It's not drinking, smoking, cussing, acting crazy. It has nothing to do with your behavior. That behavior is what might cause you to miss the design and the plan. But we need to go to the root and start teaching people what the design and the plan is, and the behavior will take care of themselves. We got this thing backwards, you guys. We've been after people's behavior. Tell them, don't go to the movies, don't roller skate, don't go to the beach, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Those are all elements from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We need to go after it and let people know who they are. A couple of minutes ago when I said, if you got kids that got problems or whatever, you need to not focus on the problem. You need to start getting them to understand their design, their destiny, what God created them to be. And man, they might be so well entrenched in it, it's going to take you some time. And you need to live it and demonstrate it. Don't just tell them. You need to live it and demonstrate how to live out of the tree of life. And when you live out of the tree of life, the word that proceeds from the mouth of God to you will help you to solve that solution with your children or your business. The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. What's the victory? Getting back to the right tree, fitting the design, fitting the plan. And that's what Paul was after. Here's what I'm trying to get at. Let me just in case I've lost you already. When we live this Christ is us life, basically what it is doing, it's taking sides with Jesus against anything that does not harmonize with the Father's original plan for your life. Now let me just take you back to the garden just a minute. Let's look how this whole thing started. Back to the garden, and this is when the problem arose. And what happened to garden should not be any problem today. It should be non-existent because last Adam wiped it out. So the serpent comes, and whatever you think the serpent was, whatever the hiss was, I think it's all within the mind of Adam. But the serpent came. I don't think any woman's going to talk to a snake. I'm not going to talk to no snake. Not going to get that close. Serpent comes, says two things. First of all, it challenges Adam's identity. And this is paramount. Everything starts with the wrong identity. And he says to Adam, you're lacking, man. You're not in God's image and likeness. If you were, you'd have the wisdom and the understanding of God. That was a flat out lie to the identity of Adam. Adam was created in the image and the likeness of God. So are you. So any voice in your head that tells you don't measure up, you're not good enough, you'll never make it, that's the hiss. That's the hiss that he's still working with today. And then the second thing he paints God as holding out. He says, God knows that in the day you eat from this tree, you're going to be just like him. In other words, God's holding back his wisdom, his understanding, and has made you an inferior being. That was a lie. God made him image and likeness, breathed into him his very essence, his very being, his very life into his nostrils. So Adam steps back and looks and says, well, maybe there is something I'm missing. He buys the lie, and man has been buying the lie ever since the fall. We call that the fall. The fall was basically the switching of trees, no longer eating from the tree of life, but eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And after 2,000 years, that lie was untwisted by the last Adam. You know what the lie was? The lie was separation that was caused by dualism. God said, only eat from the tree of life. I want you to eat from the tree of life. He said, whatever you do, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I told you because it creates now two sources, right and wrong, good and evil. And it's that dualism that has ruled over man today, and it's still, man has a problem with that because that's the way we've been raised from the get-go. All our life, through our school, through our family, our friends, our culture, everything is based on you making a determination based on culture. And in some cultures, some things are right that in other cultures they're wrong. So the life of judging began, a life of self-determination, life of now making choices, not on the life flow from the one source, but on perception, on feelings. What my five physical senses, what data is it feeding to my mind? And my mind then determines based on that data, it's good, it's evil, it's right, it's wrong. So man begins to judge himself, judges other people. In fact, he even judges God as being able to do good and evil. You know what that does? It creates fear, creates a sense of insecurity, creates a sense of being alienated from the life flow. No longer can he just rest, trust, and believe, lean back into the arms of the Father who told him, just eat from this tree and all will go well. And so now he senses lack. He senses fear. He starts to cover himself up. He doesn't want to expose himself for who he really is. And that all is the result of the wrong tree. He feels shame. He feels failure, doubt, insecurity, uncertainty. Those are all the fruits that come from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so when we feel those things, we project them onto ourselves and we say, this is who I am. And then somebody comes along and reinforces that. And then we scapegoat God and we say, he's angry with me. He's going to judge me. And old Dante brings in, and Augustine, the idea that you're not good enough, so God's going to burn you in hell forever. A bigger lie has never come down the pike than that one. So life then becomes this treadmill, this treadmill of earning goodness by doing what we feel is good. We go to church every week. We listen to the guy behind the pulpit say, all right, this is how you please God. You pray, you read your Bible, you tithe, you come to church. All these things are going to rack up good points on the side of the ledger. And when you stand before God, he's going to weigh the ledgers out. And you want to hope that the good ledger outweighs the bad. See, still determining what's good, what's evil, what's right, what's wrong. And we're not shocked when all of a sudden what happens to us is not what we determined good, because then we say we've fallen short. God's not happy. God's not pleased. So we feel ashamed, we feel vulnerable, we feel naked. And God still looks at us and says, who told you that you were naked? Who told you you were falling short? Who told you that you weren't good enough? Who told you that you were not in my image and likeness? See, image is stamped on every human being. Likeness is what we develop. And I'm going to show you, that brings me right over here to where I want to go. 1 John chapter 3. 1 John chapter 3. You got it this morning? There's one source of all life. There's only one life, one light. 7 ones we read back there in Ephesians 4:4-6. So here we are. God still says, who says you're short, you're not measuring up, you're not good enough, you're unrighteous, you're not justified, I can't look on you. Religion says God can't look on sin when all the sins come in our life. That's a total misquote of that verse, by the way. Don't have time. 1 John chapter 3. All right, here's the way it's going. Here's the hope. Let's put it back on track just a little bit. He says, behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us. So God's not mad. He's not angry. He's a lover. The word is agape. It's unconditional, one way. Nothing expect in return. Don't have to make a decision for it. It just is there. It's been direct deposited into your life. That we should be called the children of God. Man, that should just alleviate all the junk that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil has been trying to put on us. Because now we are the children of God because of his love, not because of my faith, my decision, my commitment, my dedication, whatever terms you want to put on it, that religion has taught you that those are good and will help you not be over on the evil side. And therefore, the world does not know us because it doesn't know him. When I'm teaching you at the Digital Cathedral, some of your family says, that's crazy. That guy's, he's a cult leader. I almost feel ashamed anymore if people don't think I'm leading a cult. We should be cultish to the evangelical church because it's so they don't recognize you because they don't know him. They're still stuck at the wrong tree. Now we're the children of God. It has not yet been revealed what we shall be. I'm going to do a whole teaching on this in just a little while. But notice, now we're the children of God, but it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. Child of God is not the stopping point. Calling yourself a child of God, that's not the stopping point. It has not yet been revealed what we shall be, but we know this, that when he is revealed, when we see him, when we get ourselves back to the right tree, you cannot get good revelation from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It will be tainted by your perception, by your feelings, by your emotions, by what has been fed into you all of your life. You do not get revelation from that tree. It has to come from the tree of life. When he is revealed, not talking about any second coming, that's word revelation. When you get revelation knowledge, we will be like him. That's likeness. That's the likeness developing right there. Image is done deal. Image is no question. The likeness comes from the revelation as we see him properly. We shall be like him. When you see him as he should be seen, you will become just like him. Becoming comes from beholding. Drive that home. Becoming comes from beholding. And beholding has to come from revelation. It doesn't come from a book. You may get revelation from the book, but then again, you may not. So, three things that you're going to get out of those verses. Did I read verse 3? It has not yet been revealed what we shall be. When he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Everyone that has this hope purifies himself, heads back to the right tree, just as he is pure. All right. There's about three things you pick up out of John chapter 3, the first three verses. There's a whole lot more in those three verses. I'm just going to hit three things that I want you to see. That the accurate picture of the Father is love. Behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed. He has bestowed it. You didn't pray for it. You didn't jump through hoops to get it. He bestowed it. He gave it to you. He planted it on you. Second of all, what I want you to see out of those verses, that Jesus perfectly mirrors the Father. And when we see Jesus as he is, we become that mirrored image. Jesus is the only one in history said, you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Moses couldn't say that. Jeremiah, Isaiah, David, nobody in the Old Testament, Peter, James, and John couldn't say it. Jesus said, you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And the third thing I want you to see is we become like him. The Father, Son, and Spirit brings us into that oneness, that circle. It's called perichoresis. They bring you into that circle of fellowship, and the likeness that we develop makes us aware of the circle dance, the perichoretic dance that we now join and share with the Father through the Son and the Spirit, and they invite us in, they hold our hand. We have now become one with them. Union is what this is about. There's going to be a word I introduce in just a few weeks. It's the word theosis. Theosis. It means deification or divinization. Just let it stay right there. Just let it stay right there. Now see, that's what I'm telling you. Those three things are a radical correction to religion and to the natural mind. Seeing that God is only love. That book of John chapter 1, I'm going to drop this on you and I'm going to go. Move on through the teaching. I'm not done teaching this morning. John chapter 1, verse 5. Behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us. John chapter 1. This is the message which we have heard from him and declare to you, God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So just get out of your mind that God does anything that would be related to darkness. God doesn't kill people. It's an inaccurate portrayal in the Old Testament of a God that wiped out nations, killed children. That is not Jesus. They were writing from what they knew, but Jesus said, I've come to correct that perception that was entirely wrong about my Father. So Jesus comes. When we see him, we shall be like him. Isn't that what it said? When he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. All right, major point this morning. Jesus didn't come to prove who he is and what he could do. Jesus came to reveal to us who we are and what we can do. Did you notice in John chapter 3? It has not been yet revealed what we shall be, but we know this: when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we will see him as he is. We are the children of God, image. We shall be like him, likeness. He's showing us how we come back to that pattern, to that divine source of life as oneness. Notice it didn't say by head knowledge. It comes by revelation. Seeing one source, seeing the one that I'm working so hard this morning to get you to recognize there's just one, there's not two. That's what begins to open your eyes. So John, this third chapter of 1 John is telling us a very powerful fact. He is saying that Jesus is the Father's mind made up about us. You wonder what the Father thinks about you? Look at Jesus. He doesn't think any different of you than he thinks of Jesus. In John 17, Jesus prays, Father, I pray that they would know that the love that you love me with, you love them also. Father, I want them to know that the glory you've given to me belongs to them as well. Father, I want them to know that I'm in you and you're in me and I'm in them and they're in me. Therefore, they're in you and you're in them. That's that union. That's the pattern that God designed from the very beginning. See, when you grab this, what I'm getting at this morning will help you to know and to be secure in the fact that it is he who has made us, not we ourselves. We came from one. That our DNA, our identity, is divinity. We are a partaker of the divine nature, and that we bear the image and the likeness of our source. Let me break it out this way. Every seed produces after its own kind. You don't get lions producing monkeys. You don't get sharks producing whales. And you don't get people producing dogs. Every seed produces after itself. Let me read something for you out of the Passion Translation. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 23. For through the eternal and living Word of God, you have been born again. This just collaborates with the third verse of the first chapter that says that we were born again through the resurrection. It hooked us back to the right tree. Now he says, for through the eternal and living Word of God, you have been born again. And this seed, what is the seed? It's the living Word of God, the Word that he speaks to us. It's that Word that proceeds out of his mouth, created us. It's what he did when he blew the breath of life into us. And this seed that is planted within you, that's why I'm telling you, when you see something that seems out of disharmony, when something doesn't seem right, don't look at it. Don't stop there. Look through it. Look to the seed that was planted within it. Your children, your sons, your daughters, your grandchildren, they have that seed within them. And what it needs to be is cultivated. It needs to be watered, needs to be fertilized, needs to be called upon. That seed that is planted within you can never be destroyed, but will live and grow inside of you forever. Man, we are just on the cutting at the beginning of all the good stuff. That seed produces after its kind. If lions produce lions, dogs produce dogs, elephants produce elephants, what do you think the seed of God's going to produce? Now, am I saying that you are? No, absolutely not. Are you the Christ? No, but I am living the Christ is us life. I'm now beginning to recognize, and man, it's exciting, that I need to start understanding that his life is lived as my life, and my life is lived as his life. I'm not living for him. He's not living through me. We're living a life of union together because of this seed that has been planted within us. See? Now, you have to make a choice to know this. You have to make a choice to come back to that tree of life. And when we do, then we can lay hold of that divine nature. We can lay hold of what he has promised to us. Jesus did. Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. I don't think when Jesus was 15, he had the full understanding of what was in front of him. And I don't think that any of us at this time have a full understanding of what's in front of us. What we need to start relating to is the one whose life we live, and man, my time is gone, and whose life we now live, and the one whose life now lives our life, right? My time is up. Can you just grasp? I'm sorry, I've got a whole lot more to present to you this morning, but I'm not going to hold you because I know when I watch a teaching that's too long, I just check out. Let me bottom line this. Can you grasp that there is one source of life for everything? And there is nothing that is outside this one source. All that was created by him. How can you be outside of an omnipresent being? Anything that puts you outside is a lie. Can you, at least in principle, see through contrary circumstances, through behaviors, through physical challenges, knowing that they are not the truth? Oh, they may be facts. Facts change. Facts change. We used to think the world was flat. See, truth never changes. Truth is what sets us free, not facts. And so when you come back to this one source, when you begin to understand there's only one, not two, then you begin to tap into truth, and fact will have to bend its knee to the truth. There's one life, and nothing exists outside that life in any place, whether it's visible or invisible. All right. You pray for me that I get through these teachings. I just love expounding. I love sharing. I get so cranked up during the week. I come over to Digital Cathedral, and what happened this morning, it just explodes, and I don't get through everything that I want to get through. But we'll pick it up. Don't worry. Just stay with me every week. We're on a journey. We're through a process. Remember, there's one life, one source of all things, and it includes you. You're not left out, and you're not left behind. God bless. See you next Sunday morning, same time. See you at the Digital Cathedral.
If your heart has been touched by Don Keathley's words, and you believe this ministry can enrich your spiritual journey, we warmly invite you to subscribe and hit the bell icon. By doing so, you'll stay up to date with all the new and inspiring content from the Digital Cathedral, ensuring you never miss out on the transformative power of God's love and grace. You may make a donation at donkeathley.com. We thank you for your continued support and encouragement.